I'm Adam Moz, and this is Moz Models. Hey folks, so this video is going to be a little bit different than my usual stuff because there's no radio content. Today I'm looking at solving a couple of problems with my Dubro fueling station. Specifically, my fuel pump is jammed, and the second piece is that this piece comes off constantly. Now, it does come with a lock ring. What I discovered was the lock ring wouldn't seat properly, so you put the nut on and screwed it down, and if you had the lock ring present, you couldn't even thread it on. And of course, the nut there doesn't retain, just unscrews constantly. So my fuel station is always flopping around. So I'm going to actually try and just bolt the thing together, run 2 holes through there, and just add some relatively small, say M2 screws and nuts to hold the whole thing together so that I can use this. Because I actually like just carrying out the jug with a handful of, with my chicken stick and chicken stick in there, my glow igniter in there, a couple of screwdrivers. I got 2 glow plugs in there, but that's just that. It's not a really great experience when the fat fingers there. When the whole thing just doesn't want to come up, or doesn't want to stay on the top of the jug. So we've got to solve that. First thing is figuring out what kind of bolts I've got screw heads in there, and they are Allen by the feel of it. Feels like it's SAE hardware. I'm not a fan of SAE hardware, just saying. At this point, there's no real reason to not be using metric, since pretty much everything is metric now. I do keep SAE Allen keys around. That's not it. There we go. And because my little wrench is currently out in my Jeep, because I need to install a dead pedal in the Jeep. So we'll just use the big one right now. Comes off way too easy. By the way, in my opinion, there's nothing actually wrong with SAE hardware. The problem is, fundamentally, that you're always going to need both SAE and metric tools in today's world, because you're never getting rid of the metric stuff. Too much of the stuff that comes out of China and everywhere else outside of the US is going to be metric anyways. So there's no reason not to standardize on metric everywhere. Just pop this, and we can put this aside now. And we've got this, and the basic problem is this is locked up. So let's get the back off here. It's a tight little. I do have a replacement fuel pump. I just don't feel like wasting it. I want to set it up so that I can fuel. I've got a handful of engines that require high caster fuel, so I want to set the other one up so it can be a it can be an alternate for this. And we got that. It looks like the issue is actually in the pump itself. See, put this back together. This is a little interesting to put back together. Go. And that. And all unjammed. Because we know we're going to need this. I think it had just gotten ever so slightly stuck out of alignment. So once I took it apart, put it back together, everything freed up. These are actually pretty good little fuel pumps. I don't use an electric one right now, mostly because I've got one. It just needs a little bit of repair work because the power cable on it failed. And I've got it right here, so I'll pop it out, show you. Essentially, the power cable comes out right here, and it just wore from flexing against that plastic case. And failed. So I'll take this apart. I might open that up, put a rubber grommet there, and then run a new power cable through that. I'll solder it up. I'll set it up so it can run off an XT30 connector instead of banana plugs, and then just integrate it into my flight box. But that's the core piece I actually wanted to do on video, was just get that apart, and lo and behold, it's working fine now. Just needed to pop apart and go back together. Something had gotten a little out of alignment, which is good, because that means I don't have to do nearly as much to it. And by the way, some people might think that, hey, why not just CA this thing together? Well, nitromethane to be specific, is the core ingredient in CA debonder. So if you really, really want your joint to fail, use CA somewhere that's going to get covered in nitro. I'm going to actually pull out some metric hardware that I've got floating around. Let's see what I've got in M2s. M2 by 20s should do. Let's see. Just gonna use M2s because this doesn't need to be strong. It just needs to hold the whole thing together. So, just get out my bit set. I love these little bits with the hex back, because then you can use your all your screwdrivers as a hand drill. Might actually do that here. And I'm using. If you wonder why I'm going to be using a SAE drill bit, it's because SAE doesn't quite match up with metric, right? So there's slightly different sizes at the equivalent. So if you take an SAE that's just ever so slightly larger, you get clearancing. And you want clearancing so that the screw goes through, and that way I don't have to figure out clearancing. I can just do it by sight. What I'm going to do is just flip this thing over. Yeah, normally I'd want to stand that up. Okay. Actually looking at that going, I don't need by 20. I think by 10 will do. So this is 2mm by 10mm. And in a moment I'll go grab a 1.5mm Allen. Think we got one right here? It's 2mm. Yeah, 2mm not going to fit that. That's a 1 or a 1.5. So time to reach over to wherever the heck my 1.5 is floating. And that's too big. So this needs a 1mm. See that one? It's the problem when you got them everywhere. One thing I like about the about having those nice handed ones is that they say what size they are in an easily readable form. So, also, they're really nice when you're sticking them through here. And you can easily just, oh, there we go. It's going in. So this is just close enough in terms of size that I actually have to thread it through. And if you wonder why I'm going in like this from the bottom, it's just to make accessing the nut a little bit easier once I get it there. That came out fine. Let's get some tiny little nuts and some tiny little washers. And just for giggles, we are definitely going to throw a little bit of blue Loctite on there. I don't know how well blue Loctite's going to work with nitro all over the place, but you know what? At the end of the day, it can't hurt. It's not going to affect the fuel because it'll be dry, although the fuel might affect it. And I'm getting low. I gotta go buy another bottle of, squeeze bottle of blue Loctite. And yes, I know this is not the way you're supposed to use forceps, but you know what? It works. This is just futzing around here. Now we'll clip the forceps on and use them tighten that right down and lock it up. But really, the only thing I'm doing here is just setting up retention so that the fuel cap stays on the assembly. Because that's what comes loose. The fuel cap, if the assembly and the fuel cap loosen up, then the whole thing comes apart. Yeah, I'll just screw that back together. You know, I think one will do for now, because it's just really for retention. It's not for strength or anything like that. And just put all these back into my 660 piece metric hardware set. This is cheap hardware. Like, don't get me wrong. This is Amazon special hardware. It's not going to match the quality of something like RTL fasteners. If you want good quality hardware for your airplane, go to RTL fasteners or another equivalent. Those guys are the bomb. They make the best hardware. But if you're just bodging around, you need something quickly, this isn't bad hardware. It's not great. It is stainless. It's 304. So it's not cheap. It's a better quality hardware than you get a lot of ARFs and you get in a lot of bind and flies. But it's not up to the quality of an industrial grade one. But these things are $30. One of these sets is $30. They're great spares, because you know what? To have, because if you go and buy a set from RTL Fasteners, and I do actually recommend that, get one, put it on your workbench. But the one you throw in your flight box, buy one of these. They're cheap, and you can afford to lose them. You can afford to give them away, and they'll work. They'll work pretty well, to be fair. Now I just need to put this back together. And you know what? Sometimes cheap hardware is a bad idea. It's always a bad idea. But acceptably cheap hardware is not necessarily a bad idea. Because you've got disposable hardware. It's something you can throw in your flight box and you can get the new guy up and flying when he goes down, because he's got hardware problems. And I just realized I put that on the wrong side. I want to put the bottom on first because I just bolted the whole thing together. And now I can't just get that top off when I need it. So, going to put this on. Let's get that back in there so you can see what I'm doing. What I'm doing really is I'm just preloading the bottom, so it'll slide over and into the slot there, and then I'll tighten up the top for retention. The bottom doesn't need to be super tight, because as long as it's aligned, the top will retain the pump, and then the bottom one is just sitting there so that the pump doesn't fall off to the side. And I'm setting it over because, again, I really should, regardless, buy a good set of SAE sized Allen wrenches with handles. I had a pretty nice set of T-handled ones, but I never find that I've got these, which are they're good quality T-handled ones. They're Mastercraft, so like they're not what I would call, actually, no, that fits. Should have just used this from the start. They're not what I would call top tier quality. They're not a Snap-on or a professional's tool level tool, but they're a solid. They're not also a cheap Amazon special tool. So, you're in Canada, you probably know Mastercraft. If you're not, Canadian Tire is the Canadian hardware shop. It's where we all go. It's been around since the 1920s. and they've got their own line of tools. To be honest, probably wouldn't buy tires at Canadian Tire. They're not a great tire shop. Go to a specialist. But heck, I bought groceries at Canadian Tire. I bought clothes at Canadian Tire. Bought bikes at Canadian Tire. They're a Canadian institution. There's nothing more Canadian, really, at the end of the day, than going to the Timmy's in the Canadian Tire parking lot. And yeah, I've done exactly that. Go to Canadian Tire, then go grab a Timmy's afterwards. Here we go. Got my jug. Probably out of focus. Oh, it did focus. And then drop the clunk in and screw it on. Hopefully now the bloody thing stays together. But I've done all of that. Probably helps if you screw it on in the right direction. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. I was screwing the wrong way. There we go. So I have a functional fuel jug again and a functional fill station. So that's today's video. It's just doing a little bit of repairs. There's going to be more. You're going to see more content like this because I've got all sorts of stuff floating around. Like here's an old. That's an ASP. I think it's 46. Yeah, it's a 46. This thing needs to get freed up. The carb's jammed. It's pretty tight. So before I can fly it, one of the things I like about Flying Glow is I'm bringing old hardware back, getting it back in the air. A little bit of flying classic airplanes with it. I like the noise. I like this. I like the sound. I like the smell. It's where it's at for me for a good part of the hobby, which is funny. You know, I run the latest and greatest radio hardware, and I'm putting it in 50-year-old airplane designs, running 40-year-old engines. But it's what floats my boat. And you know, at the end of the day, this hobby is about having fun. So do what floats your boat. I do dig the baling wire retention for the rubber bit there. Whoever has done this has had that rubber bit slip off at some point. So they just put a piece of baling wire, wired it into the zip ties, so that if the rubber bit falls off, first off, it can't come off because it's being held. Second off, if it perhaps did, it would just flop around there, and rather than disappearing, and you got to go buy another one. But yeah, so I'm going to be resurrecting this engine. I got a bunch more in the pile, but that's you may see some of this in future videos. You'll also see some of this in the air when you see me flying. So have a great day.